I mention the defaults only because they're there for you to use as kind of a starter to build your own reports off of. And you'll see me do that a number of times today during this session. I'll use some of the default reports that are there and use to build off of. But other times I've already set up some other reports in the system that I will be using to show you to illustrate some features of the reporting process. What I'm going to do also is I'm going to take those default reports and I'm going to use the copy button as my starting point to copy one of those default reports to a new name and then work on that new report. So your first button on the upper left in your reporting area is your copy button. And if I click on that, I'll see what my options are. I can either copy from a report to a new report, or I can rename an existing report. I'm going to go ahead and do a copy, so I'm just going to pull down this check register that's named Checks This Month. And what we're going to try to accomplish here today is to build a report library that is kind of a monthly reporting library. So if I was going to do that, I'm probably running these reports after the fact, and what I really want is last month's information. So I'm just going to rename this to Checks Last Month. All right. And when I click OK on that, you'll see that will bring up the new name there in the report name field. Now, just a couple other items on this setup tab that I want to go over very quickly. Right below the report name, there's a button selector that says Print Name In. And you're probably going to want to print that report name that you just gave the report somewhere on the report. So your choices are to print it in the header, print it in the footer, or do not print it on the report. I like to print it in the footer personally. It's kind of non-discrete down there, but it will put the report name on the report so that if you're looking at that on a piece of paper, the next time you want to run that same report, you know what report it was that gave you that piece of paper you're looking at. Also, there's another checkbox over here to the right that says Page Footer, and the check is to include the page footer. My preference is to always include that because the page footer has the page number on it. So if you're dealing with a multi-page report and you happen to be carrying it down the hall and you drop it on the floor, it's kind of easy to put it back together if you have the page footer on the report, so you have the page numbers there right in front of you. All right. The next field on the Setup tab that I want to talk about very briefly is this Current Transactions Date field. And on the check register that we're running, those are the only dates that you're going to enter for this report. Now you'll notice that in the date items, it's selected to say this month, and you might wonder why it says 12/1/2012 through 12/31 of 2012 if we're looking at this month. The reason for that is there is a way in the system on a workstation by workstation basis that you can set up default reporting dates. And you may not know this, but that's under the Options tab on Customize Workstation Settings. And on the Reports tab of that, there's a field that says Default Reporting Date. And if that field is filled in, that will drive the default dates that you see on your report setup screens when you go in there. So you see this is set to 12/31/12, and that is the reason that you're seeing this month equate to December of 2012. So if I take that out, okay, and I'm going to undo my changes here to this checks last month and go back through this process again. And when I did that, now you see this month comes up as actually this month. Okay. I'm going to change the print name back to footer. So now we've got the correct dates in here that I want to see, and actually I want to use last month is what I want to use to coincide with the name of my report. So now I get March. So that finishes the conversation about the setup tab. And you notice there are a total of 6 tabs on this report setup. You will see at least 6 tabs on every report setup screen. On some report setups, there may be more tabs that you'll see, and we'll look at a couple of those later on down the line. All right. Very briefly going to go through the rest of these tabs and just briefly describe a couple of things. On your content tab, up the top part of that screen, you'll notice that what we're looking at here is it says items by page. So we're in this particular case, we're doing a page break on a change in the GL code. So if we have multiple cash accounts that we're running these check registers for, then at the end of the first cash account, we'd get a page break, and the new cash account would start on a new page. Down at the bottom is we're building the body of the report. So we're selecting the columns that we want to appear on the report. So the columns on the right have been selected to appear on the report. We have various options on the left that we can use to also include on the report if we so desire. But for the time being, we've decided that we want doc number, doc description, name, effective date, and the transaction amount. So those are going to be the columns that are on our report. We have a filter tab, and again, these tabs will be on all reports. In the filter here, if we wanted to filter for just one specific GL account, I could do that. So I could move the GL account code over and save that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that back off. All right. We have an options tab, and on this particular report, there's only a couple of minor options that you have to select from. We'll see more options as we get into some of the other reports. On the layout tab, there's 2 sections to the screen. The top section is the font section, so you can change the font sizes on some of these different areas of the report. For example, if I wanted to change the font size on the org name that shows up at the top of the report, if I put my arrow out here, I put my pointer out here in the little gray box to the left of the org name, I get a single-headed arrow out there. I click on that. That is now highlighted. By the way, I can do multiple highlights. I can do shift-click if I wanted to do that and do multiple ones. But right now, I'm just going to do the org name. And then if I click the font setup button, it would let me change that font for that particular area of the screen, so or that particular area of the report. So maybe I want to change the size and make it 12. I can do that. The bottom part of the screen is for changing the orientation from portrait to landscape and for changing the margin. So if I click the page setup button, it gives me that, and also the paper size. So it gives me the information there to do that. All right. And the final tab, excuse me, the final tab that you'll see on all reports is the security tab. And basically that's a checkbox to not allow changes to this report. If you check that box, that means only the user that sets up the report will be able to make any changes to that report. Other users would be able to copy that report to a new name and then make changes to it under the new name. So that's a brief view of a basic report, and then obviously we have our different print options that we can do. We can do a print to screen, we can do a print preview, or we can send it to the actual printer itself. My preference is to do a preview over the print to screen, just because that shows you how it's going to fit on the paper. So here's the result of that report, and we can see there that it's just a basic check register. Okay, so I spent a little time on that. I'm going to go through some of the other reports and just show you what some of the different items are that you might see on the different reports. Excuse me. So next I want to go take a look at a trial balance, and I'm going to access this through the general ledger analysis and the normal trial balance. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up an existing report and just kind of talk about the information that you see on the screen here. I am going to make one change to it and save it though. What you'll notice here is now we have more date fields that we're dealing with than we had on the check register. And that's because we're dealing with balances here. And you'll notice under the balances dates, there's two different fields. There's an account balances begin field, and you notice it is set to 1/1/2011. And why would that be? Well, that's set there because the last fiscal year that was closed was 12/31/2010. And how can I find that out if I go under activities and go to close fiscal year? It's going to try to close fiscal year ending 12/31/2011. So I haven't closed that year yet. So what this field does for a trial balance and for balance sheet, for any report that has balance sheet accounts on it, it uses the account balances begin date to start accumulating a beginning balance for those balance sheet accounts for whatever the current year report is. So in my case, the current year report is 1/1/2014. So the system's going to go back to 1/1/2011 and start rolling forward all the activity to determine beginning balances as of 1/1/2014. So this just shows you can run reports for the current year without having to close a prior year. So that's what we're showing here. So I'm going to call this a normal TB 2014. All right. So you have more date fields on there. In addition, now you're going to see another tab up here at the top. You still have your content and filter tab, but you see another tab that says groups. And groups can be used for many different things in the system. These are account groups. Mainly they're used to kind of aggregate accounts. So if you have a number of similar accounts, for example, if you have 3 or 4 salaries accounts and 3 or 4 fringe benefit accounts, and maybe you have payroll taxes that you want to include in there. It depends on how you want to group them together, but maybe overall those are called, you want to roll them up into a group called personnel expense. You're able to do that. You're able to go set up a group called personnel, and you can assign those individual accounts to it. And that's done through the reports, assign report groups, and then you choose which segment that you want to assign the groups for, and then you choose a group set name that you want to use. So some of these are defaults, as you see here, again with the brackets. You can make up your own. So we previously have set up a group set called income statement accounts, and then for the individual group codes within that set, we have set up something called salaries and wages, and we've assigned these accounts to the salaries and wages group. All right, and we did a whole, the better part of a whole user group dealing with account groups last fall, and I'm sure we'll repeat that at some point in time. But just suffice it to say, you're able to set up report groups for any of your different segments. So if you need to group your programs or departments in a certain way to roll those up into one, you can do that. So what we're going to get here, if we're going to run a report by the group code instead of the GL code, we could get a title that just said wages and salaries, and that would include a one-line item to show the total of these 4 accounts that you see here. So that's what groups can do for you. So then to show an example here, the way that would work, if we wanted to use the GL groups on this trial balance, we would simply say we want to use the income statement accounts here for the GL groups. Back on the content tab, instead of selecting the GL code here, or possibly in addition to selecting the GL code, because we can run a GL group and a GL code at the same time. But let's just say we wanted to use the groups instead. What we could do is we could send the group code over, and then we could send the group title over. And I'm actually going to illustrate this on a different report later on. So just wanted to show you that grouping was available. And I'll show you later on a report that actually uses the groups. So I'm going to take those back out for the time being and put just the accounts back over because I want to run this report and save it. So let's take the GL code over. And for the account title, let's take the GL code over. And then let's move those back up to the top where they should be. All right. So you've got a Groups tab, and once again, I'll show you later on an actual example of a report using groups. So we've got that as a new item now that we've put onto the reports. All right. Also, on the Options tab here now, we have some more options on this particular report. And you'll see, depending on the particular report that you're running, the items available on the Options tab will vary. Sometimes you'll have 1 or 2, sometimes you'll have 8 or 10 different options. So you'll see that as we go through the system. So let me just take a snapshot of this report and make sure it kind of looks like I want it to, and it looks like it does. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that one. Okay. So we've got 2 reports that we've created now that later on we're going to put in our library. Let's move on and get to a little bit more complicated report. We're going to go in and we're going to run a expanded general ledger report. We've got a couple set up here already, and I think what we'll do is we'll just take a look at a specific month detail report. And once again, I think we'll look at last month. And you know what? I need to go back and change my trial balance to last month because I ran it for this month, but I'll do that in just a minute. Once again, for the general ledger, since we're going to have balance sheet accounts in here, we want the account balances begin to go all the way back to 1/1/2011 to start building that beginning balance. Our current reporting year is going to start at 1/1 of this year. We're going to run this for last month. If we go to the Content tab now, what we're going to find is we're going to have even more options available here in the available columns that we can move over, and we would expect that because now we're printing detail information. So you can see what we've selected here. We've selected a whole bunch of detail information to print on this report. And I'm going to show you, just take a minute to talk about some of these other columns that are showing now on this Content tab that I didn't show you before. You've got a sort column, so at this point you see we're sorting first by the GL code, and then we're going down to sort by the effective date. Is going to be the next sort within the GL code. All right, and then we're going to total on that GL code. Our next column is we're setting those column widths, and that's in inches. And there's always going to be 1/10 of an inch between each of those columns, so you have to remember that. And it shows you over here on the left side in the middle how wide that report is going to be. So we're at 9.7 inches with everything that we have in here at this point. And you have to remember that doesn't include the margins on the report, so you have to calculate in the margins on top of that to make sure it's going to fit on your page. All right, there's another column that says Show Repeats. So what we're doing here is we're going to show the GL code on every line, even if it's the same as it was on the previous line. That's what the show repeats means. Same for the document number, session ID, effective date. Next column is a wrapping column. So if the item that you've selected doesn't fit in the width that you've selected, if you check the wrap box, that will wrap on that particular line. Otherwise, it will truncate. And one other thing I didn't discuss previously is this column heading. And what you see here is when you first select these items to move over, they will come over with default column headings. Anything that is grayed out, you will not be able to change that column heading. But anything that is white, so anything except for the first 2 columns on this report, you can change what it says as far as the column heading goes. So in this instance here, We've already shortened this. Instead of saying document date, we shortened it to doc date. We shortened the transaction description to just description. So you can go in and make changes to those column headings if you so desire. So if you have a report that you're running right now and it has a column heading on it that is something that you really don't want to see, come into here into the content tab and check and see if this is white, and if it's white, you'll be able to make that change on there. Okay. So again, more available columns on this report, and once again, if we go over to the Options tab, we're going to have some different options on here than maybe we had before. One thing to be aware of, on certain reports in the system, you can include unposted transactions in that report. If you do that, at the top of the report in the heading, it will have a line that says includes unposted transactions. So just be aware of that. So let me go ahead and just print a preview of this report, make sure I'm going to fit on the page like I want to. It looks like I am. So I'm going to go ahead and save that report. So I can put it in the library later on. I'm going to go ahead and close out. All right. So let's go in and talk a little bit about some financial statements. And then we'll go and we'll actually set up our report library. So if we go into reports and financial statements, and let's just start with a balance sheet. We've got one set up at balance sheet. And now you'll notice on this particular setup screen, there's another field on the Setup tab, and it says Financial Statement Format. And that's where you're going to choose the format that you want to use. And there is a default format in the system, but you can go in and build your own financial statement formats. And your financial statement formats are really kind of like, if you think of it as when you build an outline when you're writing a paper. So you build Roman numeral number 1, and under that you have a subheading of A, and under that you might have a subheading of 1. That's kind of what your financial statement format is like, and I'm just going to go show you a brief example of this particular format for the balance sheet. So let's bring that up. That's under financial statement formats, create statement formats, and then you give it the statement type. So we're talking about a balance sheet. And this particular format name that we're working with is this internal one. Okay, so we give it a statement title, and that's going to be the title that's actually going to show up on the report. That's what's going to print on the report balance sheet. So you can make that say whatever you want. And then there's a tab where you can create the outline for that particular financial statement. And we've done that already, and what you see here is you see the main headings. This is like your Roman numeral number 1, assets, Roman numeral number 2, liabilities, Roman numeral number 3, equity, and kind of your Roman numeral number 4 is your total liabilities and equity. And then you see these pluses next to these main headings. We call these sections, but next to the main headings. And if you click on the plus, you'll see we've inserted some subheadings in here that we want these accounts to roll up into. So we've got a subheading of cash, another AR, investments, inventory, et cetera, and then we've got the liabilities broken down also, and we've got the equity section broken down. And this last section is just a total section that's totaling the equity and the liabilities. One thing you should always have on a balance, and then when you go into these lower levels, that's where you can go and tell it which GL accounts belong under that subheading. Okay, so you have to be at the lowest level. We could have gone down one more level here if we'd have wanted to. You're allowed 3 levels. So your first level here is assets. Your second level here is cash. If we wanted to break it down further somehow, we could have gone another step in and broken down cash into a 3rd level. But at this point, we decided 2 levels was enough for the report that we wanted to run. So we've set up these subheadings, and under the cache, we assigned these specific accounts. Now, if you look here, you'll notice we've done assignments under all the rest of the subheadings also. So if I went to each of these other subheadings and highlighted them and then went to assign, we would see there's accounts under there. But you notice there's one account hanging out over here on the left side under available items that hasn't been assigned yet. If you're setting up a balance sheet, you should never have anything left over on the left side. That's how you get a balance sheet out of balance situation. So you want to make sure you have all the accounts assigned somewhere. This happens to be a buildings and vehicle account, so I know it should go under property and equipment. So I'm going to go there and come back here and just tell it to move that over under the property and equipment, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that. So that's a brief look at the formatting. Again, we're just building outlines and assigning the accounts under the subheadings that they belong under. All right? You can build as many different of those formats as you need. So if you need one for an internal report versus one for a board report versus one maybe for a grantor report or something like that, you could build 3 different formats that would mimic what you're looking for the different reporting needs. Okay. Go ahead and close out of that. Let's go back to our balance sheet. So we have our balance sheet internal format that we're using to run this particular report. Otherwise, we've got the same tabs, content, filter groups. Let's look at the options tab. I'm going to come back to this substitute for GL segment and when I talk about an income statement a little bit. But the statement level, let's talk about that. That just means the level that we had on the format. So back here on the format again, remember I said that you could have up to 3 levels in your outline. Well, in this one we only have 2. So that's how far we actually formatted down. So we're going to use statement level 2. We could just use statement level 1 here. Now what that would get us in the report, instead of getting us the breakdown amongst the subheadings, we would just get the heading assets, the heading and the assets listed under it, liabilities, liability listed under it, etc. We wouldn't get the breakdown into the subheadings if we just use level 1 when we ran the report. So we're going to leave that set up for level 2. And then we're going to introduce here a rounding option. So, you know, we can either leave the dollars and cents in there, or if we wanted this, if this was for a board report, maybe we want to round it to whole numbers. But we're going to leave it to here for now. Let's see what that report looks like. And in this particular report, we told it beginning of the year, current year, and change. So that's what we get on this report. And looks good. We're going to go ahead and just save that. So that's another report we have set up now that we're going to come back and put into our library. And let's go look at another type of balance sheet that we can run as a combining balance sheet. So in this particular report that we're running here, we're going to introduce on the content tab. Now, in addition to doing this, remember if this before said items by page, so it was a page break. Now it says items by page and combining column. So you notice over here in the type, we have the option to select it as a page break or select it as a column heading. So what we're doing here is we're putting each fund in its own column on this report. And that shows down here at the bottom we have an account amount, and that's going to be each individual fund, and then a total for all the funds. So that's a little bit different on a combining statement. And then we also have on this report, we have a new tab called column totals. And you'll see it lists all of our funds that we have in our chart of accounts. And then we have the option, if we so desired, where we could do a subtotal. So for example, if we wanted this just to be operating, we could do that. And then if after these next two we wanted to do another subtotal here, because those are our grants, we could call that a grant total. So we have that capability of doing that if we so desire. Let's go see what that looks like. I'm probably going to make that not fit on the page now since I added those two subtotals. And that's what I did. I'm going to get 2 pages on this report now. So let's go back and just make a change there. You notice, let me show you. You notice now, since I ran it that way, is I get my descriptions over here, then I get the operating fund, I get my total for operating, I get my state grant, my federal grant, my total for the grants, then I get the next funds on down the line, but I get no descriptions on the left side of the page here. I'm going to do 2 things here. I'm going to change this to operating. Total operating. Total grant. And what I'm also going to do is back on this content tab, I'm going to repeat that title column. And what that should allow me to do now is produce a report that says, okay, there's my operating, state grant, federal grant, total grant. And when I go to my second page, now I get my descriptions repeated again also. So that's what that repeat button will do on a combining type of report for you. Go ahead and save that. That to our library later. And let's go to an income statement real quick. So statement of revenues and expenditures. And when we get here now, we're gonna bring in some different possibilities, and we've got these set up already. But I just want to show them to you really quickly. We've got something called set up called a board revenue and expense, and that's going to be kind of a high-level report. I'll show you in a minute. And then we've got a budgeted one that shows in detail a bunch of different columns of actuals, budgets, and variances. So we'll run through both of those real quickly. Let me start with the board. Let's do the board report first. Okay, so we're going to set this up for 2014, and we're going to set this up for last month. We've selected our format, and now we have, you see, we have 3 different formats that we have the capability of using. We've set those up previously under the revenue and expense formats. What we've done on the content tab, first of all, on the groups tab here, we've told it we want to use a GL group. This is going to be a board report, so I don't necessarily want every single GL account listed on this report. So I'm going to use my groups, and I'm going to use the default group code called designation, the group set called designation. And that means is back here on the content tab, like I mentioned before, instead of telling it I want to use the GL code, I told it I want to use the GL group code. So we're using the GL group code, and we have 2 columns, the current period actual and the current year actual. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So you see we've gotten all these items that are rolled up, and the way this comes out is due to the way the group codes are set up, it comes out in alphabetical order. So you see, if you look at the listing of the groupings of accounts, they're in alphabetical order. And you'll see that's what we get when we use the groups. And again, just the 2 columns, current period and current year actual. So that's kind of a high level. You might want to set that up for the board. And if you wanted to throw in a budget column, you could do that too. But in this case, we didn't. Okay, so let's save that. And then let's go take a look at the more detailed report And let's run this for, again, let's change this to current year. And last month, we're using the same format. And what you're going to see here now is when we get down to the columns that we have selected, like I mentioned, we've got a current period actual, budget, variance, current year, which is really year-to-date, actual, budget, variance, and then the total budget for the whole year and the total budget variance. So this is a detailed report that you would use kind of possibly for internal purposes. And also what you have to be careful about on these revenue and expense statements when you're dealing with the budgets is on the options tab, there is a date range to include, to tell the system where to pull your total budgets from. Now remember, in MIP, you might be running a multi-year project, so you could have multi-year budgets, or it might just be a single-year budget, or it might be a grant year budget that differs from your organization fiscal year. So that's the reason that this date range is on the options tab, so that when you set up the report for the specific items that you're running, you want to make sure you grab the correct date range for the budget that would be proper to compare against the actual. So, you know, if this was a grant maybe that ran from October 1 to September 30th, and you had a specific report set up for it, you'd have to come in and put in that date range for the budgets if you budgeted on that grant year. Okay? So let's take a look at what this report looks like. This one has individual general ledger accounts, but it also has built into the financial statement format, it has some subheadings, so occupancy costs, direct costs, other costs, and then you see individual GL accounts underneath that. You see all the different columns that I mentioned, so you can get into a very detailed report there also of the statement of revenues and expenditures. Let's close out of that and let's save that. And then let's go take a look at one more income statement, and then we'll go build the library. So if we go on and we go to a combining statement of revenues and expenditures, remember we looked at the combining balance sheet a little while back. Let's take a look at this statement of functional expenses. A combining revenue and expense statement is a very easy way to set up a statement of functional expenses if you want to run that by your programs, for example. Let me change these balances again. Change these dates again, excuse me. And the thing you have to be aware of in these combining type reports is this current period date needs to, basically you want to run a year-to-date report, so you need to start this at the beginning of your fiscal year and go through the time frame that you're looking for. In this case, we're going through March, so it's a year-to-date report through March. And we're going to use the format that's set up for a functional expense statement. And that basically is just listing all of the individual expense accounts in this report. And how we get the breakout by program again is we go to the Content tab and we tell it that we want the program code to be a column type here as opposed to a page break. And if we go look at our columns, it's going to show us all of the individual programs that we have. So if we run that as is, oops, had a date issue. Sure do. Forgot to change that year. Opening balance. Okay, and it's telling me here I've got some groups selected and I'm not using them, so it's telling me it's just going to ignore my groups selections. What I also did on this one is I used the rounding in effect, and there you see what I have listed is I have my individual programs across the top, and then I have my individual GL expense account listing going down the side. So it's kind of a statement of functional expenses for you. And we'll go ahead and save that. And it's telling me the same thing. I could go eliminate that group if I wanted to and get rid of that message. So now we've built all those different reports. One thing I didn't show you that I wanted to show you, and I didn't, and I'll come back and show you just real quick back on a statement of revenues and expenditures if I really wanted to do this. And I'm not going to save this, but I will at least pull it in. You're able to substitute within the format if you want to. You can substitute, for example, a program code in for your GL accounts. And in this case, what I've done is in the revenue section, I've kept my GL accounts as a listing. In my expense section, instead of showing the GL accounts, I've substituted in the program codes. And that's all involved in the report format setup, the financial statement format setup, as well as setting up the report. So it's really two different pieces to the setup, and we can help you show you how to do that later on if you're interested in that. For now, I'm not going to save that. We've got all the reports built, so now we're ready to save them where we can get easy access to them. And this. And where we're going to do that is in the process manager over here. That should be part of your navigator. If it's not at any point in time, if you go to a portion of your navigator where you have access to, well, let's just go to the report. If you go to the report manager, for example, and you go to view, you'll see the process manager is checked. If that's not checked, you want to go ahead and check that, and you'll have this other piece over here, process manager. It has 3 tabs at the bottom. You can't see them, but if I point at them, one says favorites, one says reports, and one says forms. And basically what you can do here is you can take all of these reports that live in all of these different areas now. Some of these are in analysis, some of them are in lists, some of them are in financial statements. So you can take all of those that live in all those different areas and you can pull those in. Let me pin this out here to do that. Okay, you can pull these into these favorites, and you can set up different folders under this favorites tab. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up a report, or excuse me, I'm going to set up a new folder under these favorites. I'm going to call it monthly reports. Okay. And what I'm eventually going to do is I'm going to go over here to these reports, and I'm going to go into each of these different areas, for example, into my check register, and this is the report that I just set up earlier, and I'm going to say add to my favorites. Okay? I just did a right click on that existing report and told it to add it to the favorites. If I go over here now, I see it's under my favorites. All right? I'm going to move it again in just a minute, but I'm going to get all my reports over there first. So I've set that one up. Now I'm going to go to analysis, and under GL analysis, to remember, we did a trial balance. We're going to add that to our favorites. We did an expanded general ledger. That was the specific month detail. We're going to add that to our favorites. And then we're going to go to financial statements. And we did a balance sheet. Do a right click, add to favorites. And then we did a combining balance sheet by fund. We're going to add that to the favorites. We did a statement of revenues and expenditures. In fact, we did two statements of revenues and expenditures. We did the board. We're going to add favorites, and we did the budgeted. We're going to add that one to the favorites. Then we did a combining revenue and expense statement. And it was the statement of functional expenses. Okay, so we moved all of those over to our favorites tab, and there they all are. And now what I'm going to do is just highlight them all and drag them up under monthly. So now you see all those reports are contained under that monthly reports folder. I could set up another folder here for audit reports, and what I didn't cover is in the system, you're able to produce statements of cash flows, financial positions, and statement of activities that can match your audit reports. So you can set those up and produce those. So you might have another folder here that is for audit reports, for example, and you'd have those audit reports listed under there. Now, once you've got them in here, if you want to run it just as it is, all you got to do is double click on that item, and that report's going to come up, and it's going to run. Okay? It's going to come up in a print to screen format, but you can change it to print preview or whatever you want to. Okay? Close it out. So just double click. If you need to edit what is on that report, you just right-click on that report, say Edit, and it takes you to that report setup screen. You make whatever changes you need to make on it. All right? Or in addition to Edit, you can rename it or you can take it out of the favorites. So once you have those reports set up, very easy to get them into a library. Again, just pull up the Process Manager, go to the Favorites tab, right-click on the favorites folder, say create new folder, call it whatever you want, and then go to on the navigator, go to the report manager, select the section that those reports are under. For example, if you're doing financials, select financials. Go on the report tab over here. You will see all the financial statement reports that you have, and they expand with the pluses. Just right-click on the report name, click Add to Favorites. It'll go over here in the Favorites tab, and then you can just drag it up to the folder that you want it to go to. So all of those reports are there in one place now. You don't have to go everywhere to find those. Another thing to remember is there is a scheduler module in MIP, so if you own that, then you can also set those up to run at one point in time, run all those reports at the same time. Okay, and a report binder. All right, so that's kind of the process of building the reports library. I just want to mention a couple more items that we have here. If by chance you happen to have a report that you're not able to produce in MIP and you need some customization, there are some products out there that will do that. One of those is called Drill Point Reports. It's an Excel-based product, and it digs directly into the MIP database. So you can pull the information directly out of the MIP database. add on formulas and graphs so you can have a better presentation. It will drill down directly into the MIP database so you can see detailed transactions and source documents. You can set up custom financial statements that have borders, graphics, logos, etc., so that give your financials a little more customized approach. You can add user-defined fields on your reports. You can group account segments into a linear style account report. One of the big advantages of MIP is that it has a tabular chart of accounts, but sometimes folks want to produce a report that has a linear style look to it. So where you have more than one segment on the same line, for example, maybe a program and a GL account or something like that. Drill points will allow you to do that, and it will allow you to do various custom reports. I just have one example I'm going to throw up here. You can kind of rearrange and pull data into different places to suit your needs. So this is data that would be coming directly out of MIP, and you can kind of design a report to print as you need it. So that's just one example that you're looking at right there. Okay. Go back to here. So we're here to help you folks. If you have problems with your reports, you think you might need some help with the reports, we can help you out. Here's some ways to get in touch with us. First of all, you can join our LinkedIn group. You can request our newsletter. If you want to do that, make sure we have your contact information. There you see the address there, info@firstchoiceadvisors.com. Add other folks on your staff that might be interested in getting that newsletter. So let us know who your other contacts are. In addition, right now we're running a special that we hope to help you out with. And here's what we can do for you. We can take a look at your reporting requirements, give you up to 3 hours of reporting training, formatting, and library building, and give you an annual review of the system. And there you see some of the items that we'll do while we're going through that review to make sure that you're up to date using your system most efficiently and effectively. So that's available, and normally that would cost you up around $1,000. If you're interested in that and you want to schedule that with us by the end of May, we can do that for you for $495. So we'll give you basically 50% off on that particular product or that particular service that we're going to do for you. That concludes our presentation today. Hope you enjoyed it, and if there are any questions, I'm not sure any of them came through the chat.
Yes, Joe, this is Teresa. I've unmuted everyone. I've unmuted everyone. But if not, I'd like to thank everybody for coming in. And look for your email.
Thanks everybody for attending. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for attending.